If you've read my book, Cracking the Rich Code, you know it is chock full of fantastic advice from top thought leaders and super successful entrepreneurs from around the world. How would you like to be a member of an exclusive community that provides that same how to content from those same leaders? What if you were able to attend member only live events and interact with them? I'd like to invite you to join the Rich Code Club. It will change the way you think about yourself, your money, and your life. It's the only social media platform purely focused on helping you grow. Join the Rich Code Club today for free by clicking on the link in the show notes. Welcome to the Communication 24/7 podcast, where we communicate about how we communicate. I'm your host, Jennifer Furlong. So, what are we going to talk about today? What are we communicating about today? We know life is hard, right? We have our ups, we have our downs, we have our peaks, we have our valleys, we have our wins, and we have our losses. And that's exactly why I asked for my next guest. I wanted to see if he would be willing to be a guest on the show, James Heppner. He is a strategic results coach. He is an international speaker, and he is host of the weekly Wins and Losses podcast. His story is inspirational, and I think on a Monday, a lot of us could probably use some inspiration. So welcome to the show, James. Thank you so much for being a guest.
Thanks so much for having me, Jen. I really appreciate it. I was honored. I've dug into some of your work and just honored to be here. So absolutely.
Oh, I'm loving it. Before we started the show, I had mentioned, I think this is a conversation that many people will probably need to hear. And this is a conversation I think that I probably need to have because, as you know, just like I said at the beginning, we have those peaks and we have those valleys, and life is hard. So before we dive in and start doing all the psychoanalyzing and all of that stuff, why don't you tell the audience a little more about yourself, about your journey, and why is it that you do what you do today?
So let's say it this way. Today I show up, and I have for the last decade, I've developed an unshakable love of life. And I just love that I get to participate with everything in front of me. But that's kind of almost counterintuitive to how you were queuing it up, which is now, let me just say it this way. It's Monday morning. And Monday mornings can be tough, and they can be tough for all of us. And I think the key thing when I think tough is we got to look at things for what they are, and we got to see things for the reality that they are. And we have to find, when I say we have to, like reality will just continue creating reality. We have to find a way of appreciating what's directly in front of us. And sometimes when we approach our Monday, approach our week, we're like, oh yeah, right. I took a vacation from my week starting last week, Saturday morning, and here I am. I'm returning to this, right? And so when I say that I have an unshakable love of life, let me say it like this. It wasn't always like this. And I did a lot of work, and I've done a lot of work in just pursuing how is it that we can be real about life and then to really engage in the ups and downs and not be like, yay, pie in the sky, or yeah, I'm shooting for some utopia. Like that doesn't work. Utopic, the human being actually craves an experience where it gets to challenge itself and experience what's really in there. And so I love your talk and the work you're about, communication, that inner dialogue. Like, how do we treat ourselves from within? That affects everything, how we communicate with others, how we communicate within the offerings of our life or the problems of our life. It's the difference between, do we make problems bigger or do we empathize with the possibility of? There's so many good things. And I think all of this, what I mean to say is we have to, and I mentioned this earlier, we have to keep the facts intact, because without, it's hyperbole, and that's BS. The people that I serve, most of them are already ferocious achieving. They have achieved massive success in life. But here's the thing. What ends up happening when we've been fed the narrative, or let's say it like this, when we communicate to ourselves the narrative of all of what we want is out
Mm.
there. When we keep doing that, we're missing about half of life, because half of life is in how we perceive life to be. And let's be honest, life will be inevitably life. And what's inevitably life? Well, the human being, the survival instinct. So before we get into thriving, which I love thriving, but we have to first ground into the reality and the survival nature. If you don't feel safe in your survival, you won't take a step. I don't care who you are, you won't take a step into thriving. And the inevitability of life is no matter how you spin it, your body experiences in the moment, am I winning or am I losing? That's just what it is. That's the survival nature. I'm not saying you are losing or you are winning, but this is the perceptions that we create. And so when you observe that, ask yourself, listeners, whoever's tapping into the show, ask yourself, when has something ever turned out exactly the way you thought it was going to? Well, that's a rhetorical answer, a question. The answer is never. Meaning the inevitability is life will be what it will be. Meaning you're going to be served on a generous platter the perceptions of many wins and many losses. And about half of what you experience is loss or the perception of. So unless you can utilize and maximize the losses of your life, and this is why people find me, when um, doing life and walking past half of life no longer works looks a bit like somebody who's really achieving, founders, CEOs, owners of companies, really echelon people who are like, you know what, I'm just sick of this striving. Why is it? And this is what they come to me for. They come to me because I'm the less strain, more gain person.
Mm.
Less strain, more gain. And it's like, how is it that life is actually a setup? It's like what you're saying, Jennifer. You like me. I'm walking, all of us walking into Monday morning, and it's like, here I stand in front of all of this again. And how is that for some people? You got the Jeff Bezos, you got the Elon Musk, we got these people in the world. It just looks like no matter what they do, well, I'll just go buy Twitter for 44 billion. Yeah, I guess I don't want to do lawsuits. I'll do this. And I think just to make it really, really short and condensed, what we do with what we perceive as our losses, I think is critical, because I think we have an overdeveloped muscle for what we do with our perceived wins. I think the human being can observe that when we observe ourselves winning, what ends up happening is we develop an inflated ego. And which human being doesn't tend to think a little better of itself than it actually is? I'll give you an example. My wife and I, we have 2 kids. I've been married to Meg for 22 years, been with her for all of 28 years. And I have 2 teenage boys. Rowan is 17 and Harrison 15. And we took family pictures. And when the pictures came back, this is a hilarious story about me. When the pictures came back into our hands, I looked at them and I said, Meg, this isn't true. She says, what do you mean? I said, I look better than this. Well, we all
This is not reality.
right? We all have a bit of an inflative way of looking at ourselves. When reality reveals, like I got some wrinkles up here. I'm wearing the hat today just because, I'm having a bad hair day.
Bad
And plus
hair
I like
day.
this hat. I like the hat. I'm growing up my hair, and I got these wrinkles up here. And I said, that's not who I am. So we all like to think we're a little better than we are. And so the honest truth is losses, or the perceptions of, they nicely help us tear down that ego so that our ego container, the container is what we want, that it expands. We can hold more wins, hold more losses without a flinch. Walk into Monday morning and be like, yeah, I'm overwhelmed towards something, not because of, there's so much, because of. And that's, I think, when I say I got an unshakable love of life, it's like, yeah, I'm right now in the throes of a massive project. I honestly feel like I'm a complete failure. I feel like this isn't working out at all how I thought it was going to work out. And I literally have had to do about 4 or 5 funerals in my mind about how I thought it was going to go. And this is just what it looks like when you create something, you edit, you create, you re-edit, you have to let it go, and you have to be like, yeah, what is this? And so I think to embrace reality, sorry for that long answer, but to embrace reality, I think it takes a bit of inner stomach. And it takes you to be present with things be present with the discomfort until the gift appears. And I could cry saying it because I know what that takes. Stay with the discomfort until the gift appears, because guess what? You got what it takes. I know you do. We all do. And you think you don't. And that makes sense because you've never been here before. But if you just stay with it, you're going to experience expansion happening in real time. And that's the self-respect you crave. We all want those things.
There are so many wonderful points that you just made. I want to take a few minutes to unpack because I think it's critical for many people who might be listening to understand how we can take smaller bites of this so that we can take what we're learning here and apply it in our own lives. So one of the things that you had mentioned, and by the way, if anybody out there is wondering, why are we even talking about this on a show that's supposed to be about communication skills, how to learn to be better communicators? Well, I firmly believe in order for us to be the most effective at communicating, there's going to be some internal work that we got to do. And this is one of the things that's connected with what James just touched on. You had mentioned the word perception. And so oftentimes when we talk about communication, we are so focused on what's the perception that we have of others. And yes, absolutely, that's important. Just even one thing that you said about Elon Musk, billions of dollars, and how must life be for, all of these people that have all of this money. And that is so true. We look on social media all the time. How must life be for all these people? They're, putting out videos and all of these wonderful pictures, and it gives us this perception of them. And so we come to the table with this perception of others, and that will have an impact on how we think we could be communicating more effectively with them. There's another side to that equation that I don't think we have enough conversations about. And that's, again, why I wanted to have you in this conversation, the perception of ourselves. And it's that internal work. What is our perception of success? What does that look like in our perceptions of wins versus perceptions of losses? For example, if you are a go-getter, if you are a performer, if you are action-oriented, and I'm one of those people, I tend to feel really good when I feel like I have managed to accomplish something, and I will be on cloud 9 for a hot second. And then I will begin to feel like, okay, what's the next thing? What's the next thing in order to be able to feel good? Now that internal conversation that happens at that time, and I know a lot of listeners are probably relating to this, that's not a feel-good conversation that you have to have with yourself. So what do you say with these top performers? Because I know a lot of top performers have that exact same experience. They're living for the next performance. They're living for the next thing because that's how we define success. That's our win. What is that internal conversation look like? What do we need to be focusing on, or what can we be focusing on so that we don't have such a negative type of conversation with ourselves? Because I don't think we should be having that type of a negative conversation with ourselves.
Yeah, I think, and I love that so much. You queued that up, and I got so much respect for people like yourself who take your specific work and that the core of it is what's happening on the inside. And so one of the questions that I'd have is, to you ferocious achievers, by the way, I'm one of them. And what do we want? Well, and just ask Jennifer. I think she just said it. We want it all.
Yeah.
We want it all. And, honestly, that's fantastic news. Why not have it all? Right. And having it all, in my opinion, doesn't look like being an unhelpful, unbeneficial human where we step on other people to get it all. I think have it all comes from when we ask ourselves the question, are my achievements fueled by fulfillment or anxious striving? And I think what we all want greater gains with less strains. It's what I'm known for. Like people have coined me the self-help hacker. Why? Because we do heavy work in a light way. The heavy work of like getting down into your ecosystem and figuring out where does your confidence, that unstableness come from, and the greater gains that we all want creates the unshakable confidence that we all crave. We want to develop an inner cord to our inner resourcefulness. Who doesn't want to leverage both a win and a perceived loss? Who doesn't want to see the hidden opportunity in the most challenging of situations? Who doesn't want, I love it. You talked about taking action. Who doesn't want to initiate bold, courageous action, no matter the circumstance? Like, who doesn't want that? Who doesn't want to achieve in a non-rushed and non-anxious state? Who doesn't want to expand their inner capacity, like to be able to handle more and hold more? Who doesn't want to be able to capitalize? Like, there's an achiever word, right? Who doesn't want to capitalize? And that doesn't just mean monetarily, but capitalize. We want to make good. We want to take what's given to us, participate with what's directly in front of us, and make good of what is there. Make good of it and make it all that it can be, right? If I look about what is it when we're anxiously striving, it's being rushed and losing our energy, really just giving it away by focusing on things you can't control. We create more strain when we're secretly scared that we won't have the capacity to handle a worst case scenario. Like, I have this gentleman who I was on the call with the other day, and he's a very successful entrepreneur. And if I'd say the name, most people would probably know him. The interesting thing is, when I asked questions about where are they struggling and where is their anxious striving coming from, most people will say, in order of importance, being secretly scared that they won't have the capacity to handle worst case scenario comes up. So even Jennifer, tap in with yourself. I'm doing the same thing here. I got a project I'm working through. What at the core of it actually creates that being afraid of the fear? Having fear is no problem, but being afraid of the fear is the problem. Like, that's the spike protein, being afraid of the fear. Fear is you can just dance with it. But as soon as you're afraid of it, it's like when you get really deep down inside, ask yourself that question. Like, perhaps you and I, perhaps we all, the big project, that thing that we've said we're challenging ourselves towards, we're a little bit afraid secretly deep down inside. And that's controlling, that's communicating within our psyche about how we perceive things, and how we perceive things shapes the words, shapes the action, shapes how we communicate with others. And that therein has a direct effect within our ability to pull the opportunity closer or push it further away. Like, who likes to think about self-sabotage? But we secretly all do it when we don't ask ourselves, what am I actually secretly most scared about, right? And when I think about less strain, I think, man, who doesn't want to stop resisting reality and make the problem bigger? Who doesn't want to stop struggling with not knowing how to utilize the emotions for the inner fuel and stop that inner warring conflict of having to decide, should I be firm or should I be compassionate? Like, that's a war. Self-sabotage. Who likes to think about leaving untapped potential on the table by buying into limiting beliefs? Like, I can go on and on and on. And again, who doesn't want to focus and be able to laser down on the exact area of life? Feeling insecure in the midst of the storm, that's normal. But being afraid to feel insecure in the midst of the storm, that's a problem. Because if we're afraid of it, now we're going to choose to fail at capitalizing when the situation is most challenging. So all that I happen to know is all of us, we want to show up and we want to enjoy our life. And we're not machines. Like, anxious striving is really hamster wheel living, we all want to unload that fear and anxiety and lack of clarity and the unhelpful pressure that comes from fearful hustling. And we want to move away from that spinning wheel. And, there's nothing wrong. I'll never forget. I'll share, like a quick story if you're okay with it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so years ago, I'll never forget, I was struggling so deeply. And this is before I developed this unshakable love of life. And I remember thinking, why me? Right. And there's the victim talk. There's the inner that's too helpful. And I found a way, basically, in 2008, because of the pressures that were delivered into our world. I was in real estate. I had a son that was born high functioning, autistic. We went through an audit. It was pretty vicious, to be honest. And I found a way to check out of life, 18 and a half hours sleeping a day, overdosing melatonin and gravel, checking out when life demanded of me that I check in. And I think about, listeners, if you just think about Monday morning, wherever you are at, projects, I don't know where you're at in life, but ask yourself, the things that are uncomfortable, what are you doing with them?
Mm.
Are you leveraging them? Or are you trying to eliminate them? I tried to eliminate them for near 3 years. I almost lost my family, my business, all of my achievements, my wife and kids. I'm surprised he stayed. But I mean, I was in the bedroom for 18 hours a day. Like when I told my wife I was going to the office, I'd get in the car and I'd find a back road and an abandoned farmyard. We used to live in, prairies in Manitoba. It's a province straight up from North Dakota. I find a small, old, abandoned farmyard where I'd park the car, I'd hop in the back seat, grab a blanket, and overdose on melatonin and gravel so that I could check out of life. I didn't want to be here. And that's what happens if we don't utilize, if we're always trying to eliminate. And so like, well, that's thought's evil, that thought's evil. Actually, why don't you let it take you somewhere?
Mm.
Let it take you and go like, what is this discomfort saying about me? What am I actually most scared of? What am I? And so, because if you don't go deeper, it will control your life. And if you don't deal with it, then you're kicking the can down the road. And guess what? The next time when you don't want it to show up, it'll show up to the power of 10.
Mm.
That's what happens in life. Like most people say, well, I don't want to deal with things like that, heavy things like that. That's, I think, because we've labeled those things as bad.
Yeah.
Because what do we all want? We want to win. We don't want to. And actually, your greatest glory comes when you turn your face towards the darkness and you see in the darkness these beautiful things that are just standing there for you. If you can just for a hot second not flinch and just take them in and let them circulate through you and feel like I realized when I did this work, I could feel how untowards I was towards myself. The communication that I had was so not helpful. Like I'd say things, James is such an idiot. Why do you do the things you do? Like even now, when I was sharing that, I'm dealing with a big project. There's still talk like that going on. And instead of me looking at it, if I turn my face and go elsewhere, I'm literally creating the very opposite of what I want. Now, here's where I want to just tap on. We all tend to empathize with our problems more than our possibilities. And that's normal and that's natural. But until we firstly understand that we do that, and then secondly, do something with that. And when I mean do something with it, it isn't to say we can't empathize with the problem. That's fine. That's fair. But we can't end there. If we stop at that, we're stuck. That's the exact thing that creates stuckness. When we empathize with problems, like why do we hire coaches? Why do we go to events that take us beyond? The simple thing that all of these people and events do is if they're doing it well, they won't just charge past the pain. They'll empathize with the pain, and then they'll hold the ego container of that individual, of that event. It'll hold all the pain and it'll stay with it. And then it will begin to have you understand that you can also empathize with the possibilities and the opportunity. And all of a sudden, this is where you connect. The pain equals the opportunity. Pain isn't wrong. It isn't actually even heavy. Pain is this there to say, who actually are you inside it? To be totally honest, your next level of achieving in this world, and again, non-anxious achieving, please let me say it this way, is waiting for you there. And this whole story began, and I kind of lost my way other than I'm going to reconnect it now. It came and it showed me in the moment when I checked out of life that me achieving and my desire to achieve was the problem. And I said, oh my goodness, you see, this is the thing. Like I'm just wanting to take in. And I said, I got to get rid of that achiever. I got to get rid of it. And Jen, after I came out of that story, I was just so in love with life. And I tried it where I just said, listen, it's no more about achieving. It's just about serving and about serving. And honestly, I felt good for about 3 weeks, like really good in that state. But to be totally honest, we all want to achieve. Right. We're all communicating with ourselves. Like, what do I, because that's what makes a human being feel beneficial. If we don't feel beneficial, we don't live. We don't see the purpose of being here. So let me say it like this, and maybe I'm going to really scratch the record for all of you, including you, Jen. Sometimes Monday morning, we're like, listen, this is the energy I'm showing up with. I'm thinking, oh gosh, I got to do this now. Like, oh, this problem and this, oh my goodness, oh crap. You want to be a beneficial human. Turn your face towards it and instead of trying to delay it and hope that it just goes away, just turn your face towards it and say, like, listen, what's the news of this? What's the good? What is it actually asking me to just accept? And if I can accept that it's not all going to turn out the way that I want, you know what? it may all free us.
Mm-hmm.
Because we get to choose if life traps us or frees us. We get to choose if anything and everything frees us or if anything and everything traps us. That's an important decision we have to make.
Yeah. I really appreciate that phrase that you're using, anxious striving. I think that brings about such a powerful visual
Mm,
because you're right. We all, as humans, of course, we want to strive to become better, to get better, to have better things,
mm,
to grow, right? To learn. But when you put that term anxious in front of that, that anxious type of striving, it brings about a visual for me of someone. Are you striving for this because you feel like whatever this external thing is that you're trying to achieve, is that what you need? Is that what you
mm,
think you need
mm,
in order to finally be happy or to feel like you are successful? Versus what would your life be like if you didn't have that anxious type of striving, but you were just here and you're doing what you love, you're involved, you're in the moment, and you're doing this because this is something that you genuinely enjoy doing, and you don't have that sense of anxiousness
mm,
that I have to have this in order to feel successful. I think that is such an important distinction that you have touched on just with that phrase right there. I think if we can just take a moment and think about that, what does that mean to me? This anxious type of striving that I have in my life going on, and I think that hopefully will have, for me, I'm having a light bulb moment
mm,
right now with
mm,
that because that's what I feel.
mhm,
Is it something that is external?
mhm,
And that's why I'm seeking it out so fervently
mm,
versus having something on the inside, you know,
mhm.
that it's already there.
Yeah, that's beautiful the way, eloquent the way you put that all together. Sometimes I think to myself, why do I even talk? I just need to listen. And the people would say it all so quickly. It's so nice. Something that comes up for me is um, when you think about creating anything,
Mm,
the innovations, these brain gasms, you got this idea,
mhm,
you're going to put it out, and of course, it's going to be fantastic. You were married to it before you began. You see it all
mhm,
come together. This is going to be the creme de la creme. Feel that it's amazing. So that's the win, the perception of the win. And then what happens? We create it, and then the evidence appears.
mm,
And the
mhm,
evidence is always a little different. So no matter how you spin it, we see it to some degree as a loss. So we have to I always do a little funeral for myself. I always plan a mini funeral after I have this vision. And then when I create it and say, yeah, what was I expecting? Was I expecting for it to be any different? Like reality will be what it will be. And so I think us innovative people, us achievers, we like to
mhm,
create because we realize for us to feel most beneficial is to create.
mm,
But are we creating so that we can take or to give? And this is what I mean. It's so
mm.
interesting. There's a little shift, a very subtle, it's a nuance play. But for example, I've gotten to know you a little, Jennifer, and I would say you're a giver. You're a
Mhm,
giver. Sometimes in my life, and perhaps like yours, we're about creating and we're thinking, where's this warring, conflicting tension coming from? Not helpful tension,
mhm,
but it's conflicting. Where's this coming from? And it's like if we don't live in alignment with our values, you're
mhm,
such a giver. But I think
mhm,
sometimes I have to be so careful, and perhaps you as well, I don't know, but the world just says, "Hey, listen, don't you wanna create great evidence? Don't you wanna
mhm.
create amazing and the evidence is out there,
Right.
external. Don't you wanna
Yeah.
create
Mhm,
amazing because amazing evidence, you're gonna feel the effect of it because things will come your way because of that." That's what the world says, but that's short
right.
term. The evidence long term is when we look at it and say, "Hey, listen, actually, why did I create this? So that I can prove to myself and others that I'm worthy? Or did I actually create this because I already know that I am worthy?
Mm,
And I'm just
mhm,
creating out of a heart of abundance? And to be totally honest, I'm going to do the courageous thing. I'm going to create, and I'm going to create evidence that I'm going to have to swallow because it ain't going to be so pretty half the time or sometimes.
mhm.
Okay. But I'm doing this all from a giving spirit. And I think that we go from giver to a taker without meaning to.
That is such a wonderful way to look at how we're perceiving what we're creating, what we're putting out in the world. And Lorinda is joining us from LinkedIn. Hi, Lorinda. I know that she works in the grief space,
Mhm.
and she's talking about, within her world from grief to growth, and talking about anxiety, anxiousness of the unknown. I think that's a really important point. Sometimes, and I think you touch on this as well, James, talking about the fear of the unknown. Like, we have perceptions of what might be a win versus what we perceive might be a loss. And then after that, it's like, okay, what
Mhm.
happens? And then
Mhm.
if it goes the way we want it to go, that's great. We're comfortable with that,
Mhm.
right? That's awesome. If it
Mhm.
goes the way that we did not intend it to go, then that's where that anxiousness comes in.
Mhm.
Now, you say, though, losses are perceived losses. Can you say a little more about how is it a perceived loss, and how can that help us better? I guess, how does that help us better manage those ups and downs?
Mhm.
What
Mhm.
is the difference between a perception of loss versus what we think, no, it's really a loss. Like, this
Mhm.
is really a
Mhm.
loss.
Mhm. And I love the way you brought that forward. And at some point in time, and you got some pretty on point listeners,
Uh-huh.
this was brought forward. And I love it because, to be totally honest, when I coined the term weekly wins and losses, and then I attached the perceptions of, there are
Mhm.
some things in life that genuinely feel like losses, and genuine, not just feel, but
Mhm.
they
Yeah.
are losses. Like, I
Yeah.
lost,
Mhm.
for example, my grandpa years and years and
Mhm.
years ago, but I lost him. Like, he's gone. Like,
Mhm.
he's with me, but he's not here the same way. Like, I lost his physical presence.
Yeah. Mhm.
And so when I think about perception, and Lorinda, you're so on point. There's nothing unhelpful. There's nothing unhealthy with tapping into the anxiousness you feel about the unknown, because frankly, the unknown will produce something called energy. And energy in your
Mhm.
body can be measured out in excitement or anxiousness. And your body measures out
Mhm.
the exact same way.
Yeah, it feels the same.
It feels the same and actually measures out the same way too.
Mhm.
So what's
Mhm.
fascinating is, I'm going to go back to being afraid of the fear or being afraid
Mm.
of the anxiousness.
Mhm.
That's the issue.
Mm. Mhm.
Developing the inner musculature, and this takes time. This isn't just like a switch you hit.
Mhm.
This takes being patient with yourself. Typically, what I found, it takes working with someone, really doing that
Mhm.
deep work, right? And then, so back to Lorinda's point and tying together what you're saying, when it comes to death, of course we'll get a little anxious because we don't know what's there. To have the fear of the unknown is totally normal. And the
Mhm.
beautiful thing
Mhm.
is, it's like, wow, I don't know what's gonna happen. It's actually kind of exciting, not in a
Mhm.
weird way, but it kind of
Right.
brings about, like, the invitation for something brand new,
Right.
and
Yeah.
it's, like, beyond our reference point. Like, what will I experience, and what will the world be without great Aunt Mary here? I don't
Mhm.
know, like,
Mhm.
what would anyway, so, sorry, help me out. You're saying, and help the audience just understand the perception of, just if you don't mind, just quantify, or just, yeah, say that again, your
Yeah,
question.
no, absolutely. So, one of the things that I think has helped me in figuring out, this anxiousness that we feel and all of this pressure that we put on ourselves to, whether it's win versus our perception of losing, is thinking about, well, is this really a loss? In the grand scheme of things, this could potentially be the one thing that needed to happen in order to get to the good that's on the other side. And I think it's very in tune with, a lot of times we hesitate, we avoid having difficult conversations with others because it doesn't feel good,
Mm,
right?
mhm,
We
mhm.
worry about that. It creates that sense of anxiousness in us. And I think it's the same thing when we have this fear of losing, or we have this fear of the unknown, we have this fear of, what if this doesn't go the way that I wanted it to go? We start feeling that sense of anxiousness. And I think it's pretty similar. We will avoid it, kind of like what you were saying earlier. We'll avoid it just so that we don't have to feel that anxiousness and fear. But if we could look at it in terms of the perception of a loss, and yeah, just like with your example, if a loved one passes away, if you are laid off of a job, if you lose pay because of something, if you have anything taken away, that is a real loss, and you're going to feel that in a real way. Yesterday, 5 years ago yesterday, I was diagnosed with breast cancer.
Mm-hmm.
And something you said early resonated with me, and that, it's really easy to sit there and say, why me?
Mm-hmm.
And then you get into that victim,
Mm-hmm.
mindset.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really easy to stay down in that valley. But now, as I have the advantage of looking back, through that experience 5 years later of that diagnosis and the treatments and the surgeries and everything that has happened, one thing that has become really clear for me in terms of wins and losses is that, that perception of, at the time, why me? This is terrible. This is the worst thing ever. But now I know I'm actually on the other side of that. And there were a lot of lessons learned. Like, now I know the stuff is just the stuff. I'm not going to worry about the house so much, all the tangible stuff, all the superficial stuff. All of that kind of went out the window for me. For me, now what's really important is to try to be of service, to others. And in turn, that has really helped fulfill, this need that I have to be of service. So I guess, that just the perception aspect of
I get it.
it really hit something for me, with you using that type of language. I think it's important. That others
Yeah, and you know
understand
what?
how important that is.
And I love it that you slowed it right down so that we can dive into this little crack, this nuance. It's so important. Yeah. Some people are like, I have this feeling and I should probably just get beyond it. Like and listen to the inner communication here. People are like, well, I'm such an idiot. I've read all the books. It's like me. I read all the books. I went to all the seminars before the story of that unhelpful side where I checked out of life. I'd read all this stuff. How can I deliver this? Why is it that we can't, in a moment of most need, we're scanning and we're going, oh, I need to, no, this isn't the thing. I'm such an idiot. And then, of course, the stories keep coming back and looping her back in the same way. And it brings us right back to those feelings again. I got a question for you, Jen. When you think about it, a lot of people they would probably say, and they're trying to be helpful, they'd say, well, feelings, the ones you're having, those aren't really real. And I would say this, I think to a large degree, if we don't say the feeling is real, then why do we have it?
Yeah.
We have it because it invites us. Can we say if the feeling is actually real, not just how we perceive it, but actually real in real life? Can we stomach that? Like, think of the gift. If we can stomach, if it's actually real, like if I feel like a loser, if that's how I feel, instead of me just going, oh, I got to get rid of that feeling. That's disempowering talks. You need to do some coaching. And whoa, hang on a second. That's a real feeling. The truth is I can be a loser and a winner. Big deal.
Yeah.
So owner superpower, meaning you walk right up to and say, and this is the whole point of accepting worst case scenario. The inner talk we have, we are powerful beyond power if we can accept the worst of the worst and be like, yeah, and what else? Instead of saying, no, stop, get rid of this. You have to replace it with something, but keeping facts intact. The feeling, it's like, to your point, when you had breast cancer, or even if I think about my wife taught me something beautiful a couple of years ago, and I realized, and this really annoyed me for so many years, when something would happen and it was disastrous, like, mini disasters that we say are like bigger than they are, a cup would fall on our new carpet and milk would be in the cup. I'd be like, oh goodness, this is the worst,
Yeah. Yeah.
And what she would say is she'd be like, okay. And I'd be like, wait a minute. The kids just kind of like walked into the living room and they took the milk and they kind of bumped the table and it fell over. And she goes, okay, what do we do now? And I'm thinking to myself, that's not very helpful. The only thing is, I'd be honest, there was a peaceful environment amongst a situation that could have been super chaotic. And I became so fascinated by it, and it almost hypnotized me towards an environment that was triggering, where we were all going to go into flight or fight and all just start screaming.
Yeah.
She just de-escalated it, and we all began to, like, one person went to get a rag, another person went to get soap, one person, and this just naturally happened. And I'm like, how does this work? And I asked her one day, she goes, well, here's the thing. What are we all thinking might happen? And I said, well, I'm thinking it might ruin the rug. It might smell forever. And she goes, exactly. What do you think the boys are thinking? I said, they probably feel like idiots. Exactly. She goes, so they're having a real feeling, you're having a real feeling, and I'm having a real feeling. So what's the most helpful thing to do here? And I said, oh, she goes, see, to focus on shaming yourself for the feeling, listen, let's help ourselves process and then go like, okay, so what do we want to do next? So what she'd always say is, okay, so what do we do now? She goes, and she was totally relaxed about it. Of course, we get the supplies and we take care of all these things. You see, here's what I've realized. I've adopted the word okay. So when something happens, and I had to work with this for years, when a cup falls and it smashes, or I do something crazy and something falls apart in my business, the first thing that I've been trained myself to say, and this has taken probably 7-8 years, I say, oh, okay. And the reason that I say that is because of that milk spilling example. And I use it because, firstly, I think when we take something and we take a feeling and go tangibly in real life, tomorrow this will be real, and in 30 years it'll be real. Now we're not taking the reality and the realness of the feeling and letting it just stand, but we're letting it spread forward and control our life. And there's 4 words that I actually like to use in this. And I say, the first one, when something happens, I say, okay. And then I use the word, let's see, meaning instead of me thinking it's going to ruin the carpet forever, I just say, let's see, let's let some time pass. Let's overdose that little area with soap and disinfectant. And let's see, you never know. See, maybe they say that if you spill milk, you can't get it out, but you never know. This might be different. And then the second thing is just let it be. So let's see and let it be. It's actually 5 words. Let it see and let it be. First step is let's see. Let's let time pass. Let's let more evidence appear. We have it seems like such a lockdown on wanting to make things permanent and pervasive and personal. I think we just need to slow it all down and be like, well, let's just let reality creep in. Let's give ourselves a little bit distance. And to your point, that feeling, when you feel certain things, really honor that feeling. It's real. Because for someone, a feeling is real. Try to ever influence someone if you say that feeling isn't real. They're going to fight you.
Yeah.
So you're going to want to first come around and say, I know it feels real. And for you, it probably is. Tell me how it's real for you right now. Then they'll tell you how it's real. And you can listen and listen, listen. And again, to the point on listen with empathy first. Don't try to solve their problem. They're just saying, this is what's coming up. And honestly, a human being is most alive when it feels. So be like, how does it feel like when you feel like that? And they go, oh, it feels like shit. It feels like so heavy. What am I going to do? And be like, I know, I know. I get it. I totally get it. Well, let's see what happens. You never know. I know we can say things like I once spilt milk. And guess what? They said it would ruin the carpet forever. But for some random happen chance, it didn't for me. But I don't know. I don't know what it might be for you, but I'm totally with you on it. So I think, we have to be so careful when we work with other people. We don't just say, well, it's your perception of, and then we just slam them and move along. That doesn't help. We have to be like, no, it feels real, and I'm with you. Because in this moment, like I went through yesterday some of my kids, and I felt like literally it was the shit. Like, it'll never get beyond this. This is how they are. They're choosing to disrespect and not honor life. And I mean, they're great kids. You know what? I just gave it a night. So I activated let's see. I allowed more evidence to appear. And actually, what's the evidence? I just slept. I woke up with a new perspective. And when I realized, I woke up thinking to myself, you know what? Just let it alone. Meaning they're old enough. They're just wanting to experience life. And James, you were once tasked with leading them in all ways, and you still are to some degree, but they want to experience reality in their own way. So they're nicely saying to you that they're not going to have you just create their life experience anymore, all of.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that's making any sense, but I just wanted to really go back to your feelings are real, and that's beautiful, but how not to let them go beyond the beauty that they are.
You touched on something really powerful right now, and I want to reiterate it because in communication, again, focusing on how we communicate with others, a powerful tool that we can use is the pause. And that's what you're talking, that's why I loved when you said your wife said, okay. that forces you paused in that moment. Okay. And so what happens, and I think this is so great we're having this conversation. I think it's going to be useful for a lot of people, because now we're talking
Mm,
about this internal dialogue
mm,
that we have. When we're feeling frustrated, we're feeling anxious about something, we're thinking we're going through this loss right now, and we're all up in our feelings. And that internal dialogue, if we start with okay, and we pause, and what that is doing is that's giving us a moment. A lot of time when we have that fight or flight response, right? We're going back to just basic biology here. What happens in our brains?
mhm,
We're
mhm,
upset about something, we're frightened about something, we're anxious about something. We're not using the logical front part of our brain at that
mhm,
moment, right? We go back to the amygdala, right? And now we're reacting with our
mhm,
emotions. But if we practice that, okay, and give it a moment
mm,
and pause, that gives you an opportunity for that to shift now,
mm,
so that it takes it from that emotional state into let's phase it into, all right, now let's start thinking about this logically. And it's not that you are not recognizing the feelings. You're recognizing the feelings, absolutely feel those feelings. But when it comes to actually making decisions at that time, and how you're communicating with yourself,
mhm,
I think it's really important
mm,
to be able to know, maybe I need to shift my thinking right now, move it from the emotional brain to the logical brain, and give myself that moment. Because you're right, everything's in transition, right?
mm,
Everything's in
mhm,
transition.
mhm.
This is a moment in time. And I think that pause, that okay, that's brilliant. Okay. That's allowing me to see that for what it is. Like you said, let's see it for what it is. I
It's
love that.
such
I'm going to be saying that all the time now.
I
Okay.
know, and that's the weirdest thing, because I vowed that if my wife would just stop using that word, my life would get profoundly better. But the only thing is, again, I became aware that the de-escalation happened naturally everywhere in
Yep.
all parts of our
Yep.
life. And I'm like, wait a minute. And this is what happened for me. Why am I saying that she's doing it for our family when she's modeling something that she's trained herself, obviously, to do? Perhaps we can
Yeah.
all do this. And in the beginning, when I said okay, it felt really weird. I'm like, no, but I want to be angry at this, right? And I'm like, well,
Yeah.
what? And so I just started using it more. And now, honestly, the worst of worst can happen. And I've trained my subconscious to say that and be in that state before I even have a chance to react. The first thing
Yeah.
that I do, my act of rebellion, is to say, okay. And I just take a step back, and literally, so the power of the pause, I lean back in my chair, meaning I have a feeling. The myth of rationality is everywhere.
Hmm. Hmm.
98 science proves 98% of our life experience is emotional, 2% is logic.
Hmm.
So we have to learn how to use our emotions well and how to
Yeah.
utilize them well.
Hmm.
So in my opinion, if you have an emotion, the worst thing to do, the thing that you don't want to do, the thing that's going to make you an anxious driver to the hilt, and make it that you become a taker versus the giver that you are, is when an emotion comes, you go, I gotta attack this faster, further. I gotta go harder.
Hmm.
No, slow down, take a step back and go, I own me. Watch this. Okay,
Hmm.
take a step back, just process. Because if you don't, what tends to happen, we get overwhelmed
Yep.
about life. And reality is that emotions are overwhelming us towards certain things. And if we take a pause, we'll see exactly what that emotion, the gift, how that emotion taps into helping our logic move us forward. Because the only thing
Mm.
that emotions are is they are priming tools to help us take next proper action. But that
Mhm.
means we have to lean into them. And the pause lets us do it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Maximize the emotion so that, like you say, when we get to a logical state, we can
Mhm.
actually make decisions without fear. And no, that's powerful. I love it. I love it.
Yeah, yeah. I know that this is transition. Like everything's temporary. This too, the saying, this too shall pass, right? This is a moment in time. You have a quote on your profile that I love. It and you say, "My joy is not for sale."
Mm,
Can you say a little bit about that? What do you mean? What do
mm,
you mean by that? Because I think there's
mm.
there's something that we could all probably take from that.
Well, I'll say it like this. Back in 2008, that was the financial crisis. I was in the real estate sector, and I think I already mentioned and shared I had a son that was born with high functioning autism. And
Mm-hmm.
make a story real quick. I was raised in a home where my dad is all about serving people, yet I think what he desired most is finances. And so they always say that a human being will be led by desire more than demand. So my dad taught me how to be a good boy all the time.
Mm-hmm.
The only thing is what I perceived he wanted most, so the desires of his heart, was finances. And so what's interesting is when I was 24, I started my first company, and we built custom homes. We shipped them throughout the United States and Canada. And I became quite successful, I'll be honest. I'll never forget the first million I had in my bank account. From there, it just kept growing. And I wanted to really stay humble. But of course, when 2008 comes around, the phone stopped ringing. And of course, you begin to think you're a fallacy. You begin to think that, it's a one luck wonder. And so listeners, just feel today, interest rates rising, inflation, there's probably some, added financial strain and no matter how successful you are, I don't care if you have 3 billion, if you once had 6 and it's now 3, you're going to feel the same level of strain. It's all the same for all of us. And ask yourself the question, where are you willing to sell your life experience to the highest or lowest bidder because of something financial? And that quote that you just read, my joy is not for sale. When I came through my story, the other end, where I developed an unshakable love with life, it was like a miracle for me.
Mm-hmm.
And the miracle came because I asked myself, what lesson did I learn through all of this? And I said to myself, listen, I will never, ever put my joy up for sale, meaning when you look at the bank account, does the bank account give you joy? It's a static number. It doesn't do anything. Log into your bank account 15 times in a day. Like, who doesn't do it when they're under strain? Most people.
Mm-hmm.
That's more strain, less gain. You want less strain, more gain. So if I would log in and I'd see these numbers and they're all about the same, every single time I performed actions like that, I'd reaffirm that my joy was literally for sale, and I would sell it to the lowest bidder. And I would just do something static, like go to my bank account balance. So I just decided, never again in my life will finances have the ability, period, to control the state that I show up in. And I'm crying when I'm saying this right now because it's so powerful. It near ruined my life that I was willing originally to sell my joy to some financial number. Never again, not to the highest bidder, not to the lowest bidder. When it comes to finances, never again. It's not for sale. My joy is not for sale, because joy is where all your energy comes from. It's where your passion comes from. If you don't have joy in life, it feels hopeless. You go through a strain. We talk about, turning your face towards tensions and emotions. Listen, it's going to be too much, because sooner or later, you got to make this statement. You got to claim your life, because if you don't, you will sell it to something. You might sell it to money. You'll have something in your life. You'll say, well, if my career would just blossom more, so you'll say everything is career. I don't know what it's for you, but look at the thing that it is for you, listener. And just ask yourself, are you okay with selling your life to that piece? And if you're not, you're going to want to do something a little different. You're going to want to have a conversation with Jen, myself. Find someone. I don't care who you find, but find someone, a good human being that's going to get into your wheelhouse and want the best for you. Take you there, further, faster, without hurting anyone. Yeah, that's right. No more hurting yourself. No more. You got to find someone that's willing to do it. And you got to be willing to say, yeah, the truth is I have been putting my joy up for sale.
That is so powerful. That is amazing. James, is there anything else that you would like to highlight for the audience, or a question that maybe you were hoping I would ask that I haven't gotten to?
Listeners, maybe tap into, where are some areas, choose 1 or 2 areas of your life and look for small things. Don't look for like a big, I'm grateful for, the window beside me. Well, I guess that's not a big thing, but, look for something that is like truly a very small thing that you can be grateful for, and just really focus on it, and just be honest with yourself. If that wasn't in your life, or if you would stop walking past that little thing to be grateful for, just ask yourself, what small thing in life could you be grateful for? One or two things that you could be really grateful for today. And I challenge you to take a sticky note and write those two things down and just focus on those for a week and just see what happens in your life. Like, just do a little experiment, because gratitude is your superpower.
Mm.
We so often, they say the human being actually focuses on what it has perceived it's lost or what it's actually lost and how to regain it more than the opportunity. So it's always looking at cup half empty. It's always thinking it's about running on fumes.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think if that's how it is, then that's how it is. The only thing is, how can we make that experience a little more enjoyable? I think when we make it what it really actually comes to be about, is when we let those gratitudes make it that those things guide us to the hope and that encouragement and that love towards life. Because goodness, we only get this one life, and what's directly in front of us is inviting us to participate with it. And we get to do with a joy, or we get to do it with a heaviness. And honestly, that communicates everything to our world.
Yeah. All right. You heard it, folks. Get out your sticky notes. Start writing and start sticking. All right, James, give us your website. How do we contact you? All that good info.
Awesome. Just go to www.jamesheppner.com. JamesHeppner.com.
Everyone, I hope you enjoyed today's episode. I really felt very strongly about having James on the show today because we do focus so much on the external communication stuff and, of course, the relationships that we have. All of that, the communication skills that we practice day to day are incredibly important, but it really starts with the internal stuff. And I felt like this was a really important conversation to have. The perceptions that we have, how we treat ourselves, how do we view our emotions, and how can we move into a life of gratitude, and what kind of true powerful change, that could implement for each and every one of us. So I hope you enjoyed the episode. Thank you once more, James, for being an amazing person and for sharing your story and just for being willing to be a person of service in offering these lessons learned to everyone, because it's important that everyone be able to hear this.
Thank you so much. Thanks so much, Jennifer. I really appreciate it. You got some great work you're participating with, and I'll continue promoting your work. So just keep doing what you're doing.
Thank you so much. All right, everybody. Y'all have a great rest of your Monday, and we will see you soon. Bye.
Take care. Bye.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this episode and you'd like to help support the podcast, please share it with others, post about it on social media, or leave a rating and a review. Imagine your favorite online dating app, but instead of using it for finding dates, you are booking podcasting interviews. Podmatch uses similar technology to match the ideal podcast host with the ideal podcast guest for interviews. I know it works because that's how I get so many awesome guests for my show. I used to spend hours scouring my social media channels, hoping to be able to find just one reliable guest for my show. Now I simply log into Podmatch and let the program do all the work. It really is just that easy. And if you are a podcaster looking for compatible guests, or you are a guest looking to be on a reputable podcast, sign up for Podmatch today by clicking on the link in the show notes.